I have Jonah here with me, and we also have a guest, Mike Nicholas. Happy to welcome Mike to the show. Mike has his own podcast, been doing this longer than me, I think. I met Mike through the podcasters mastermind group that we're both part of. And I started listening to his podcast, and it was very interesting for a lot of reasons that we'll get into. And so I reached out to Mike and asked if he would want to come on our show and just have a discussion, and he graciously agreed to. So here we are. So our listeners know enough about us, Mike, but what do you want our listeners to know about you before we start talking about sort of the things that you go over in your podcast?
Craig, first of all, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I have to confess, however, I'm not familiar with your podcast. I intend to get more familiar with it, obviously. Who are your listeners? So I can kind of have a clue who I'm talking
Just
to.
us and our wives right now. We're the Catholic Reddit. We talk about all kinds of different things. To give you an example, we talk about everything from sex to marital debt to we talk about sex a lot.
Sex and masturbation.
I did hear Craig's interview with Jeannie. So
yeah,
I know about
you
that.
got a kind of a flavor, yeah. So but you know,
Difficult issues within for married Catholic men specifically,
Okay.
probably.
difficult Catholic issues. You know, and some of it is just lifestyle type stuff, you know, being a husband and father, you know, everyday stuff. You know, there isn't a nice, well-defined theme here, but I think you're going to find that the majority of the listeners are probably guys like us that are married and got kids and probably Catholic or somewhat religious in background. And we're just here talking about stuff and specifically confronting things that from a Catholic perspective, and not that we're evangelists or apologists here. We have our own questions and concerns that we try to just bring up without being afraid to talk about things. So
Okay. I don't talk about sex much at all on my podcast. So this, I hope I'm not too boring.
well, we'll save that for Jeannie. So
It's just basically I'm kind of an older guy, I guess. My whole background has been, I describe myself as a left-brainer, meaning I grew up very structured. Grew up as a Catholic, oldest of 7 children. My father converted to Catholicism. My mother was a very strict Catholic, and I went to Catholic school, Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. I was an altar boy. I went to the military academy at West Point back in the dark ages, graduated in 77. Served as a combat arms officer, Army Cav, and then spent time in reserves. Went from there to spent a little bit of time actually working for a Catholic organization, and then I went to government contracting. My wheelhouse at the time is project management and government. Spent 15 years in the Pentagon. I was there in 9/11, and a Mason because of the men I met in the Pentagon. So I made a Mason in 2000 and served as Grand Master of Masons. I just moved up basically through the ranks, if you will. Served as Grand Master of Masons in 2020. It's a highly unusual year, and that's when this whole soul awakening thing kind of happened for me. So as a left-brainer, very dogmatic, very pragmatic, very focused, very much concentrated on operational issues and making things happen program management wise, I was shocked with what happened. What happened was we lost our son in 2020, our younger son. He had liver disease and passed in 2020, and subsequent to that, things happened that caused me to reevaluate my faith, my beliefs, and that's how I got to the whole podcasting thing.
you said that was in 2020 that happened?
Yes, March of 2020,
So-
where our son died.
And not to make too big of a deal about this. Sometimes the audio isn't great. I don't know what kind of mic you're using, if you if you need to like come closer to your computer at all, but sometimes it's not always easy to hear
You
what
have
you're
any
saying.
trouble hearing me?
Yeah,
An overhead mic, this thing.
okay,
Let me switch off of that,
okay.
switch maybe to the computer.
You.
That's
Um,
going to the Mac.
okay, good. So, so up until 2020, would you say you were, what, do you consider yourself a practicing Catholic up until that point?
Yes, oddly enough, I still consider myself a practicing Catholic.
Okay, didn't even, I didn't mean to
I
assume
haven't
otherwise.
given up on Catholicism. I just I think there's different dimensions to it that I now believe in. Yeah, I mean we went to church all the time, went to church with our children, and I'm they're not practicing Catholic, or our remaining son is not necessarily practicing Catholic, but yeah, 2020
So
changed.
what is that like being a Freemason, I guess? What does that entail?
When I joined Freemasonry, I really was looking for something, I think, to supplement my bond that I had in the military. So it's a brotherhood thing. It's a fraternal organization, but there's really two different parts to Freemasonry. One is operational part, which I got involved in as a operations kind of guy and moved up through leadership. And we do charitable things. I have a men that I know and love and respect that are part of my lodge. Uh, I've taken an oath basically to support and be their brothers, no matter what. However, there's also an esoteric part of Freemasonry, which I ignored up until about 2020, which deals with understanding very deep truths about why we're here, what the purpose of life is, how reality really works. And those parts of Freemasonry are often ignored or not even understood. And those are the kind of things I'm getting into now.
And has that been sort of a very integral part of this process that you've gone through since 2020 and the kind of the reevaluation that you're doing?
Freemasonry has not necessarily been, no, it's caused me to consider this other part of Freemasonry. I'm sure you've probably heard of things like chakras and soul groups and reincarnation. And these are things that Freemasonry is not a religion, right? So it has no dogma, but
Mhm.
it's open to believing these kind of things. And I always thought the guys that believed in that or discussed that or had meetings and talked about meditation were nut jobs, right? That didn't appeal to me. I was interested in managing meetings, managing lodges, building Freemasonry membership, making sure things ran smoothly, helping to develop leadership and leaders. But yeah, as I've come to understand, I guess we'll talk about what happened, but as I've come to understand there's something else for sure beyond this life, um, I've turned back to look more closely at the esoteric part of Freemasonry.
So, do you want to introduce us into kind of what happened and the thought process that went into you sort of, as you described, looking at things a little different and being open to
Sure.
or to different realities?
Thank you. So when our son passed away, it was March of 2020. COVID was just starting to hit then, and he was in a skilled nursing facility. We couldn't see him for the last couple weeks of his life. We didn't even know that he had passed right away because we couldn't get into this place. He was in a coma.
Right.
And eventually found him in a hospital, and we made the difficult decision to disconnect him from life support. And we kind of held his hand and were there when he passed. It was very, very difficult for my wife and I. And in May of 2020, May 17th to be exact, she suggested to me, why don't you just go hit some golf balls? Because Matt and I, my son's Matt and I used to do that, as a father and son thing. He wasn't married, but we'd hang out, play golf, whatever. So I went to a driving range that we always used to go to and tried to hit some golf balls. And it was so painful that I couldn't continue. I left the balls there, walked away. I was crying so hard that I couldn't hit balls anymore. Came home, and I had my little to-do list as a project manager at home. And one of those things was to put up a couple security cameras. They're Amazon Blink. They're about this big. And I put one outside of our home looking at our back door and one inside looking at our dining room, back sliding glass door across our dining room table. Went to bed at 20 minutes past midnight. So it was early in the morning of May 18th. My phone pinged, and I didn't know it, but I just set the default settings so that it pinged your phone whenever there was movement on the camera. But I didn't even know what it meant. So it went off next to my head. I looked at my phone. It said there's a motion alarm on your kitchen dining room camera. And so I jumped up out of bed and I thought, holy mackerel, I just installed this thing and already somebody's breaking into our house.
Right.
Jumped up, I grabbed things, and I was about to go do I don't know what. But as I was heading down the stairs, what's that, Jonah?
No, that was me. You were going to charge into the situation.
My wife is still sleeping. She didn't wake up. I pressed the button on this though, because the button has brings up the 10-second clip of what it recorded. And it was a glowing, luminescent, blinking orb about this size. And I didn't know what to call it at the time, but it just started where our son's head was at the dining room table when he sat with us. And as it blinked, it moved towards the camera and glided off gracefully off the side of the camera. I stopped. I was stunned. I knew right away instinctively that it was him trying to comfort me, because it had been a very difficult day. But I woke my wife up. Neither of us could get back to sleep. We didn't know what was going on. It was just kept replaying it. Anyway, that started happening about every 2 nights, about every couple nights. It would happen about the same time, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And it got to the point where we had trouble going to sleep. So when it didn't happen, we'd be up to like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the ping to see these things. And so at one point I said out loud, Matt, buddy, you need to knock this off. Your mom and I need to get this. Well, they stopped. They completely stopped. Nothing happened for like 2 weeks. And I was beside myself. I thought, oh my gosh, I've ticked off God. I've ticked off Matt. I've ticked off spirit, whatever. And I discovered after a couple of days that you have to turn these things on at night. I don't know if you know how much you know about blink cameras, but you don't want them on during the day, because if you move around your dining room, they would be alerting. So you have to turn them on. So they have a live feature where you can look through them live, and I turned it on by accident and I saw an orb. I thought, holy mackerel, you could actually see these things, on purpose. So make a long story short, we eventually learned that we can not only see them, but if we prayed and asked for them to show, they show up. And it became 1 orb, 5 orbs, 10 orbs, 100 orbs. We found out that we can sit in the same room with them and they would be all around us. Sometimes I'd put my hand up and they would give me a high five. Sometimes they'd come right on my palm. They would avoid us. Sometimes they were going to hit us. I didn't know what this was, but it gave my wife and I comfort that it was happening. So I turned to religion. So I want to know what the church thought about this. I consulted a friend who's a Catholic, and he said, well, first of all, if God's permitting you to see these things, then, just pray that you're seeing what's coming from the light and not from the dark, but pray that it's good and then accept it as something from God. But he said, just in case, I'll put you in touch with a priest that might be able to help you. So there's a priest in Catholic University, Father Paul was his name, Dominican. And I sent him some of the video clips, because I now have 1,000 or more clips of these security camera things. Sent him the clip and I said, Father, I don't know what this is, but can I talk to you about it? So it was during COVID, and he agreed to see me, but we met in the library of the Dominican House of Studies in DC. Beautiful, ornate place, both of us with our masks on. And he said, look, I can't tell you what this is, but here, this might help you. And he handed me the Catholic Catechism. Now, I just
That's
studied
not much help.
I had studied the Catholic Catechism, as a child, and memorized it, like I'm sure many of you and your listeners have, but it was not any help. It was like he didn't know, and I understand. So then I went to Georgetown. We had some Jesuit friends at Georgetown, and they're directors of departments at Georgetown. They're very experienced Jesuits. And we were actually at the beach with them up in New Jersey, my wife's family home up there. And we went for a walk in the boardwalk, and my wife and I talked to them and told them what we were seeing. And they came back and they looked at videos, and they talked for a few minutes together, and they said, look, Mike, we don't know what this is, but we know an excellent exorcist who will help your house and help clear your house out. My wife and I are like, no, we don't want that. We need this. We like this. It gives us comfort. I just want to know what we're supposed to do with this. And anyway, that experience led me to consider things I never would have considered. So I wanted to go talk to a medium about it, and I know I've researched the Bible. There are all kinds of things in the Bible about not talking to mediums, and Paul and Saul and David. But we did. I've now met over the past couple of years had sessions with maybe 12 mediums. And I've come to believe that the orbs were for me a way to awaken me from the way I was believing and seeing things. Not that there's anything wrong with Catholicism, but it was very limited on the way I perceived life, that it's called eschatology, right? The process of life and death and judgment and heaven and hell. And I never considered that, like I now believe, we do this many, many times. This is not my only shot at being on earth. I believe my soul has been here many times before and will be many times afterwards. I've been here with my son before. And that has led me to all kinds of interesting discussions and people and experiences.
So when you say that you could see the orbs and feel them, like the high five, you were physically able to touch it?
I could feel nothing. I even when they seemed to go into me, I could feel nothing. Even when they hit my hand, I could feel nothing. And I could only see them with infrared light. And I'm a engineer by training, right? So the first thing I did was I got different cameras. I bought different Amazon Blink cameras. They have indoor, outdoor. Same thing happened with both versions. I tried different phones. I connected my wife's phone. Same thing happened. I wrote to the Amazon engineers. I sent them a video clip. I said, can you tell me what you think this is? Of course, they said, who knows? I said, what spectrum of infrared light are you using? Because the cameras emit infrared light to pick up movement. And they told me. And then I ordered a camera from a place called Ghost Stoppers or Ghost Hunters or something, and I put up a very expensive, like $300 Ghost camera next to my $59.99 Amazon Blink. Turned them both on, and I was in the camera, in the picture, because I was moving so that I could make sure I could sync the two. Anyway, tens, hundreds of orbs on the Amazon camera, nothing on the Ghost Hunters camera, but they had different spectrums of IR light they were using. So I think it has something to do with the light that either excites or can see them. I don't know. And then finally, and then I'll stop. I can see them with my camera now without infrared light. So Kelly Joe, the lady that I interviewed, told me that she was able to see them because she has videos up where she's just filming them with her camera. And I said, how are you doing that? I can only see them with IR. And she said, just try, invite them and then try and see if they show up on your camera. Anyway, they did. It's only happened maybe twice where I've seen them clearly. And I also sent copies of these to people that are orb experts on the internet. Some lady out in Deadwood, Colorado, that has a thing called orbsarereal.com. I said, hey, what am I seeing? Are these really orbs, or is it dust, or is it insects? Because I want to rule out all this stuff, right? And she wrote back and said, no, it's definitely unusual, paranormal, if you will. But anyway, so I can see them now without infrared light. But I'm not so much hung up on the orbs I was for a long time. I'm now more hung up on why. I have no doubt in my mind that they're something beyond this dimension that we were living in, but I don't know why I'm seeing them. And that's my big quest now, is to better understand what my purpose is in seeing these.
Just one more question on the orbs. How large are they?
That's an interesting question. They're all different sizes and all different intensities. So all different speeds. So when I see, if I see a session where there's like 100 of them, there'll be some that are huge, like maybe the size of it's hard to judge in a room, but the size of maybe a dinner plate that just glide very gracefully, and they're translucent. There's some that are small and tiny and very bright. There's some that are like softball size that move faster and blink. I've come to believe that they represent different consciousnesses or personalities, if you will, that they are entities of themselves, and they're all different. I didn't tell you this either, but they travel with me. So, I was experimenting around the house, different rooms. They show up in different rooms. When we're not here, the orbs are not here in the house. So I've seen them in this room I'm in now, but the cameras are always on. So we were visiting some friends back in 2020, late 2020, and I turned my camera on to show them the room, and there was nothing there, no orbs. And no matter how often I would check, when we're not in the house, there's nothing. So in January of 2021, we spent 2 months in Florida, my wife and I. Cameras were still on in the house, but we had plants in the house. And we asked some of our neighbors to come in and water them for us, right? And I left the cameras on in some of the upstairs rooms and in the dining room, not on purpose. I just I didn't know when the neighbors were coming in. But anyway, it pinged. It went off, and I looked at it, and it was orbs moving in the dining room. I thought, damn, there goes my whole hypothesis about orbs not being here, when we're not in the house. And then I said, wait a second. I turned on another camera, and my neighbors were in the house. They were watering the plants. And my initial thought was almost jealousy, like, those are my orbs. But I've come to believe that everybody has their own orbs. My sister can see them. Another time that surprised me was we have a couple ladies that come clean our house, and I left the camera on again by accident, and there were orbs that were around this one maid, but not the other one. She even put a bag of trash in the garage. The garage is pitch dark, but I have a camera in there to look at the door. She dropped the bag in and closed the door, and I saw orbs in the garage. So
That's fascinating. And from the Catholic perspective, I have no issues with that, as far as I think the veil between our life and the next is so thin that, maybe you can see through that in some ways, or maybe it's guardian angels as well. I don't know. It's fascinating though, as far as, like you said, why one person would have them and another person wouldn't. That's
Yeah.
difficult to comprehend. I don't know.
Yeah, I take a little camera with me when we travel. So I've been in now 15, 20 different hotels over the past 3 or 4 years. Even when I'm riding my motorcycle, I take a little camera with me, and orbs have no ego. I'll tell you that much. They show up at Motel 6. They'll show up in Holiday Inn. They'll show up in Marriott Resort.
Are you saying that the only time you see them is through a camera, or can you see them with a naked eye?
I need a camera to see them. I
Okay.
can't.
Is that true for everyone, or do these other
Kelly Jo
people
said that she saw them with her naked eye once. And I've heard of other people that can see them with their naked eye. But I have not witnessed that.
But it's primarily a camera phenomenon, at least for you.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with the light. Like I need to have the light on when I saw that. Now, my first thought was, well, it's picking up dust, right? Because if little dust particles were moving across, maybe that's what it is in front of but the orb that I saw that was really weird was blue, and it came in through the doorway of the room I was in, and flew up to me, and then it bounced up and down and took off. And if dust can do that.
Are you able to, do you have any of these videos that you could show us or send to us?
I definitely have videos, of course. I don't.
Do you want to,
Is this
you know,
Zoom?
yeah, will it work on a share screen if I give you host privileges? I can pause, I can pause if you need to find them while we're doing that.
Yeah, why don't you pause a second, and I'll recording a second, I'll find it.
All right, we're going to have you do some share screen and actually show us some images and video of the orbs. And so I'm going to make you the host. So you you'd be the host now, so why don't you go ahead and try and share it?
So I will share the one video. And this is the very first video that happened the very first time I saw these. And it alerted me when I thought someone was breaking in our house. Did you see that?
Yep, we saw that.
Okay.
You want to play it
one more
again?
time? Yeah.
Okay.
So it started where it starts right here is where our son normally sat at the table when he was with us.
And was it dark? Was the room dark when it
Yeah.
okay.
The room's completely dark. The light you see is infrared light being emitted by the camera.
Okay. That's wild.
Now, let me ask you to do one other thing. I didn't mention this to you earlier. Keep your eye right here.
Okay.
And after the orb passes, don't follow it. Just watch what comes up here. There's a
Okay.
second orb. There's a second orb that goes up this way. It's
Okay.
very, very faint.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I did. Somebody else pointed that out to me. They said there's actually two orbs in that picture, not one. So I don't know what that second one is that goes up, but
Or it almost seemed like even a reflection of the other one. I don't know.
I thought it was initially a reflection too, but
Yeah,
I
it's
think
definitely different.
that was before I
Okay.
knew there could be multiple. So that was the very first one that got me thinking.
That was the first one that you got then?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Do you want me to do the head dodge one or just show you where there's a lot more orbs?
The maybe a zoom in on that one that was like a concentric
Yeah.
circle.
Okay. So what I'm going to show you right now is a screen grab of orbs that again, they appear 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 of them sometimes. And this is a screen grab of, can you see that okay?
It says you're, yep.
Yeah or no?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So I'm going to blow it up a little bit and then move over to it. So
Wow.
this is the orb with texture in it. I don't always see this, but this one was for some reason was pretty bright. Let's see, what date was this? This was 2020 6/30, so it was June 30th of 2020 at 22:45 at night. So quarter before 11 at night.
And so when you're getting these screen grabs, is this again, is it something is setting them off to record, or is this a
No.
kind of a constant live stream or?
This was I don't remember whether this was automatic, where the camera will automatically alert if it sees enough light and movement and capture.
Mhm.
I don't remember if this was an automatic one or one that I was actually looking for orbs or not.
Wow.
I always capture the date and the time when
Mhm.
it happens, but yeah.
Okay.
And then let me just show you one which is kind of interesting. So I did a test with my brother-in-law. We went up and we stayed at his house, and I said, check this out. My brother's Mark. I said, I'm going to go down in the basement, and his basement was very dark. It was a workout room actually, and I said, I put the camera down there, and we looked at it together, and there was nothing down there, no orbs. I said, now you hang on to my phone, and I'm going to go downstairs, and you tell me what you see. And I went downstairs and was feeling my way around in the dark, and I hear him upstairs going, "Holy crap!" And they just showed up in his basement all around me, and so I switched to reverse and had him go down, and they were around him also. But what I'm going to show you is this was a video. I went back down, and this is me. Can you see? You can't see that, can you?
Not yet.
Let me share it with you again. So this is going to be me in his basement. So like I said, they travel with us. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Okay. So it's obviously a little workout room that he's got. This little window right here is the basement window that goes outside. There's no air, no movement down here. I turned off all the air down there. And So I'm looking at them on my phone. That's what my phone right
Oh,
there. You'll start to see them.
yep.
And I can see them. And now I'm going to try and touch them with my hand, but I can't, I'm not fast enough to, yeah, they're all different sizes, some blinking, some not.
So you're seeing them on your phone, but not in your naked eye when you're there?
Right. I'm looking at them through my phone.
Okay, that's weird.
So there's probably a second or two delay, so I can't get my hand
Right.
in front of them. But anyway, that was in his basement.
That is wild.
And sometimes they all flow in the same direction. Sometimes they'll crisscross back and forth.
Can could you hear or smell anything when you were down
No,
there?
no,
Okay.
that's 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 pretty much it.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the experience. Now they've pretty much stopped at my house. If I look for them right here, I don't see them that much anymore. But if I travel, they'll be there. I also took a little camera to my wife's hospital room when she had a private room a couple months ago, and they were in the room with us there. So they I think they can show up wherever.
Why would you think they would be there but not in your house now? Like, do you have any ideas?
I think they stopped in the house because the this leads back to what I think the purpose of the orbs is. The purpose is not for me to turn them into a sideshow where I initially I was afraid to share them, right? I was afraid that if I share them, they go away. Now I believe that the purpose was to get me to do what I'm doing, which is writing the book and doing the podcast and sharing with people that there's something else going on to wake up people like me. And that it's not important anymore that I be fascinated by seeing them in my house. Sometimes they're here, but I don't look for them that much anymore. I like to see them in different places at other hotels, for example, but I'm not, I guess, enamored anymore with the orbs. I'm hoping that this leads to something else.
It's bizarre. So when we went on vacation last summer, I put up trail cameras in our house while we were gone. And they would trip every night around the same time, but there's nothing in the photos. And I even had one set of video. There's nothing in the videos. And but it wasn't UV or anything. But it just kind of reminds me of that story. And I'm sorry, it's kind of a boring story, but it's something that kind of bothered me because I'm like, what could be doing this? Because there's nothing in our house. It's moving.
If I could, let me just tell you a quick story about the mediums that we went to. So in the late fall of 2020, the priests weren't really not any help, right? So I thought, well, let me go talk to somebody who professes to be able to talk to souls on the other side of the veil, if you will. I had no idea what to expect. My wife and I went, she saw us in person, the first lady. I thought, there might be blood and chicken bones or what, I didn't know what to expect. But she was a very nice lady, and she brought up things that made me one thing with that lady that she said, which really surprised me. At one point, she got that Matt, she got the color yellow, and then eventually his liver issues, and she didn't know anything about us or him. But she said to my wife, she said, "Can you hear your son talking to you?" And my wife said, "No." And so she said, "He keeps motioning to his ears and pointing to you." And she said, "Does he talk to you?" And she said, "No." And so she was puzzled by that. And mediums are good ones, are trained to provide you what they're seeing and let you interpret it, but not lead you or whatever. But anyway, I just got the thought that occurred to me that my wife had just gotten hearing aids, and they were tiny little things. And they were underneath her hair. You couldn't even see them if she had her hair back. And I said, I think is it about the hearing aids? And then she said, "Oh, he's jumping up and down, that's what he's trying to do. But he wants you to know that he's still participating and still able to see what's going on with your life." And that meant a lot to us, that he was still able to know what was going on. She also picked up that we were looking at moving and some other things. But the most poignant experience I had was with FaceTime with a medium. And I never thought FaceTime could work for this, but it does. And the medium was talking just to me. And she said, she knew by this point about Matt. He had come through. And she said, he's making me feel this feeling on my eyebrows and my eyes and my forehead. And she's touching herself like this. And she said, I don't know why he's doing this, but I'm feeling this. And it hit me right away. I knew what she was doing. It's still hard to talk about that, but she was describing the way that I touched his face as he died. And I used to stroke his, when he was a little boy, 4 years old, and when I was trying to put him to sleep for a nap, I would stroke his eyes that way, or his eyebrows, or his forehead, and that's the way I touched him when he died. We turned off his stuff, and he lasted about 15 minutes, and during that time, that's how I touched him. Anyway, that's what she was describing, and I knew only Matt would know that, and Mary Ann, my wife. But so I have no doubt that there is something going on that we don't understand, that there are people that have gifts. And I've also come to believe it's not just mediums. I think I've communicated personally with my son too. So yeah, that was the most interesting experience I've had with a medium.
Can you talk about that interacting with your son? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. I started journaling, right? So some people suggested meditating and then writing down what it is that you hear. And so I did that, and I would write down. He would tell me, at one point he told me that this is before my wife fell, but he said something about I didn't have much time left with my wife. And I thought that was pretty interesting. It was about 2 weeks later that she fell. And actually, I don't know if I told you this earlier, but she was within a couple of days of us turning her off from life support. She was, she doesn't know this yet, but I gave away her clothes. I met with the church, I met with the funeral home, I bought a plot, all the stuff, because we were going to turn everything off. And, but anyway, so the one thing though that really woke me up to the fact that he knows what's going on is I went to this one medium, and when you go to mediums, there's all different price rates, all different whatever, and you kind of get what you pay for. And
This is all new to me.
you kind of get what you pay for, right? So I've done some mediums, and it's okay, but I thought I'd like to know what steak tastes like or whatever. So I paid for a session with the medium to the stars. Her name's Rebecca Rosen, and she has a book out called Spirited. And I read the book, and I thought she seemed to be legit, and it was quite a bit of money, but I couldn't see her. I couldn't pay enough to be just with her by myself, but I was with a group of 7 other people, 8 of us, all by FaceTime. And she goes from person to person talking to them. And at one point she was talking to another gentleman. His daughter was 36 years old. She had taken her own life. She committed suicide. She had drug issues. And Rebecca's talking to him, and she said to the group, who's Matt? And she hadn't got to me yet. And I know first time I'd done this, and I didn't say anything. She goes, there's somebody named Matt with your daughter. Who here has a Matt? So I kind of raised my hand. I said, I have a son named Matt. And she goes, is he in spirit? Yes. Is he about the same age? Yes. He's with this guy's daughter. And they were going through a life review together, is what she described it as. And they were both teachers. Matt had been a teacher. She was a teacher. And so that was interesting. So after that session, I went to the organizer, Rebecca Rosen, the secretary, and I said, Rebecca, can I contact Jim, the father of the young lady? And she said, they gave me his information, and I wrote him this long email, and I sent him some of the video clips that you see. And he was in obvious pain still, because his daughter had passed more recently. And I want to kind of help him with the comfort that I got from the orbs and the other the mediums. And I want to kind of help him, but he never responded to me. And I thought that was odd. So after about 3 weeks, I wrote to the organizer again. I said, hey, I haven't heard from this gentleman. Can you just confirm his email address? She said, hey, that's it. That's all I can give you, really. I need to protect his privacy. So in my sessions with Matt, when I was talking to him, I would do this like every couple days. I would write down what he's telling me. So what I heard him say to me was, Dad, calm down, just relax. He hasn't seen your email. And don't bug him about it. Just give him time. He hasn't seen your email. And so that's what I wrote down. Well, next day I get an email from Jim. He says, hey, I'm sorry. I just saw your email. It went to spam. And so anyway, we started a relationship that way.
Huh.
And
Wow.
thought that was pretty cool.
You mentioned you have other children, right?
I do. I have an older son with 2 grandchildren.
If you're willing to share, does he know about all this? What does he think about all this?
He knows about it. He and his wife are both not really into it or interested.
Mhm.
I don't.
You
I
don't talk about it with them?
I talk about it. You know, they know about the orbs. I've seen the orbs in their house, but I don't make a
Mhm.
big deal about it.
Yeah.
They don't need it. I will tell you that at one point, one of the memes I was seeing, she said, I'm here with Mother Mary. And this woman had been Catholic also. And I thought it was interesting that she didn't call her the Blessed Mother, she called her Mother Mary. And she said, she's bringing a child to me. Have you lost a child? And I said, no. And she said, the child is, she told the age, about 10 years old. And we didn't lose a child. But the more she talked, the more I realized that that child was the daughter of my daughter-in-law's sister, who had been born. She was born and died when she was born. And they got to hold her and be with her, but she described enough to me to make me realize that it was this baby, and she wanted me to know that this child, she had a name, was safe and with Mother Mary. I have been unable to tell my daughter-in-law or my daughter-in-law's sister about that. I don't even know how to bring that up because it was so painful for them.
Yeah. When I was listening to your episode this morning with the second part of your episode with Kelly Jo, I think you said.
Yep.
She was talking about like smelling roses and different things. It's so weird because it made me think of something that if there was ever like a really distinctly, I don't know, paranormal is the right word, but experience like this. I was a teenager and we had taken a mission trip down to Mexico to help build some houses. And on the way back, we stopped in Scottsdale, Arizona, of all places. And it was a kind of a teen youth group. And we stopped at this chapel to pray. And I was sitting in this chapel. There must have been a dozen of us. And I was sitting next to this girl. And all of a sudden, I was just overwhelmed by the smell of roses. and I kind of looked over to her. I said, you smell that? She's like, yeah, that is like really strong. We were the only people in this very small space that smelled the roses. And that's always stuck with me. And what's really sort of, I don't know, coincidental is the right word, but a couple of months ago, I was in Scottsdale, Arizona for a lawyer group. And actually part of it was it was a mastermind on YouTube. That's kind of what got me started doing this. It felt like I'd come full circle because I was back in Scottsdale and I was like something happened to me that day that I never really forgot. And now here I am doing this show, talking to you about this. It's just strange. These things just seem to connect somehow.
I have been with other people that have heard or smelled mostly. I've had one experience where I smelled my son's aftershave a lot. He used to use that stuff called Axe.
Yeah, my boys all do that too.
So I was in the car one day and I just smelled it very strong. There's nobody in the car but me.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
that's happened to me once, but I've heard stories of other people that smell roses. Generally, they associate that with Blessed Mother.
Well, and that's sort of the thing. Like I know for us Catholics, at least, that stuff happens in like I associated the roses with the Blessed Virgin. I know that when I was younger, my parents were much involved in like Medjugorje. Have you heard of Medjugorje?
Sure.
And I remember we would take the Polaroid cameras out and we'd take pictures of like the sun, and there'd be these strange images in there that really couldn't explain it. So, I got to think, I don't know. There's a lot of this stuff that I don't understand, and if they're related, I don't know how to square my beliefs as a Catholic with some of that stuff, but I'm curious where you're at. How do you? You're not discounting Catholicism. It sounds like you're just trying to you're
No,
thinking of.
one of the things I found interesting as I've met many people on this particular journey, there are so many people that have been Catholic or were raised Catholic or that, describe themselves as recovering Catholics or
Mhm.
whatever. But I find many people who have been Catholics or are still Catholic much more open to these kind of concepts of spirituality than, say, Baptists or charismatic Christians or other people that I've known that it just seems Catholics are much more open to believing these kind of things than people who are perhaps more dogmatic. So that's kind of an interesting point.
Well,
I just think that Catholicism, I'm not down on it, like I said, but I do think there's more to spirituality. I've heard this expression before that religion needs spirituality, but spirituality doesn't need religion. And many things that was raised with, I've come to question, obviously, meat on Fridays and mortal sin and
you're on the right show.
We wrestle with all that too.
that book I read, why Masons cannot be Catholics. I mean, holy mackerel, there's so many things the church, I guess, still considers heresies that are, to me, laughable. You can't pray with non-Catholics. It's a heresy. That's the case. I committed heresy when I was 5 years old because my grandmother was not Catholic, my father's mother, and she was one of the most wonderful women I knew.
Well, scrupulosity runs deep, I think, in Catholic circles for one reason or another.
But you heard, the gentleman, a friend of mine that I interviewed, he said that, he used that expression, I can't sort out or discern in the Bible what's true and what's not, so I choose to believe it all.
Yeah.
There are parts of the Bible, however,
Yeah.
and I'm no Bible expert, but I've read a lot as I've thought about these things that cannot be considered active now, like stoning people for minor transgressions or murdering or God directing the Israelites to slay 20,000 people in a day. That stuff to, to me, I don't accept as.
Well, and I actually commented on a couple of those interviews in some of our prior episodes, and I think I remember telling Jonah that for some of the struggles that I sometimes have with Catholicism, when I look outside and I try to apply my reason to some of those other views, that just I can't go to that space. There's at least I can reason my way around Catholicism and stuff where some of those other viewpoints I can't go there.
Have you heard of the ICC, the Institute for Catholic Culture?
I have not.
I don't know how I came across it, but it's a pretty good site, I think. There's a lot of videos on there, and I've been following them and watch some of their videos because I want to be, as I guess I use the word, fair, or at least open to Catholicism, and not to discount some of the things. But I did watch a recent video by a priest who speaks really well about the Nicene Council of Nicaea and what led up to that and the personalities involved. He said one thing, though, that really caught me. He said that, with all the different personalities involved and some were excluded and some were included, and how that happened, it sounded like our Congress nowadays, a complete zoo trying to come up with something. But he said, how do you know that what the Council of Nicaea came up with is right? And he said, it's right because it's what they came up with. And I thought, what? And he said the Holy Spirit would not allow them to come up with anything that was wrong. So because it's what they came up with, it has to have been correct. That type of circular reasoning
Yeah.
is a little bit
Yeah.
lost on me.
We struggle with that too.
But you guys don't have all the answers.
We have a lot of questions, a few answers. I mean, we literally just got done recording some episodes, just like stuff for like, I know I'm supposed to believe this, but I don't, I want someone to show me the work. Like, I get the answer. Now show me how you got there.
That's funny because that's exactly what my podcast is about, except I go out to other areas, reincarnation and past life regression and meditation and channeling and astrology and all kinds of things that I thought were completely nut job area.
Well, that was what I found so fascinating about you is my experience has been a lot of sort of former Catholics, so to speak, seem to end up agnostic for the most part, or just don't want just don't want anything to do with religion or spirit at all. And then to see you go from where you were to where you are, I just found very fascinating because I don't see this type of movement very often.
Where am I?
Well, I don't know, wherever you are in terms of how you're talking, you're open to spiritual or divine. I mean, it sounds like of some sort.
You realize, of course, that that's a heresy also. I forget the name of the heresy it is, but if you believe that there are other paths to God don't include that aren't strictly through Jesus Christ or strictly through Catholicism, that's a heresy.
Oh, I know. We feel like we're committing heresy all the time.
You can definitely, the orbs don't necessarily conflict with anything, I think. I mean, I have a similar viewpoint as far as like the Catholic Church is a great foundation, but there's other things that, the Catholic Church doesn't have to touch on that could be real, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That's one thing that attracts me to Freemasonry is once you get past all the baloney and the stupid conspiratorial stuff on the internet, and I don't know where the treasure is buried. Once you get beyond all that, it is a way of opening yourself to at least the possibility that there are other truths and that there are other paths to the one truth. As a Mason, you have to believe in Supreme Being, but you can be a Protestant, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, you can be anything. There's no religion in a lodge. And that appeals to me more and more. And when I interviewed my one friend, he said, well, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know a lot of good people that don't necessarily believe Jesus Christ as the path to salvation, but they believe something else. That I struggle with that.
Where do the conspiracy theories come from then? Do you have any idea?
I think that Freemasonry has been misused by people in the past. George Washington, of course, was a Freemason, and a lot of his generals were Freemasons, but Freemasonry is a way of trusting other men, right? So if I meet a man who's a Mason, I implicitly trust him until I have reason not to. Even though I don't know him, I trust him. But in some countries, especially Europe, it's been used as a base of power. It's been a way to consolidate power, all Masons. And I think that's led to conspiracies. But I joke all the time, I've gotten about as far as you can go being Grand Master, and no one's given me a key to the treasure or some secret knowledge, or, it's about service for us. And
Well, I know it's been a long time since I spent any time studying Freemasonry, but at one point there was supposedly these 33 levels, and you get to the 33rd level and you're speaking directly to Satan himself. That's the way I was told. I know a lot of how close to the 33rd level are you?
I'm pretty damn close. But there's no, that's all silliness. Pope Leo the 13th issued an encyclical in 1883, maybe 1860. Anyway, it was called. It was about outlawing Masons, and he was one of many popes. I've read the encyclical a number of times. I've read Albert Pike's response to that. Albert Pike's been vilified for a number of different reasons, but he was a pretty smart guy. And, you know, the reasons for outlawing Freemasons at that time, many of them included in Pope Leo XIII's encyclical, is Masons advocated for a public school system, right? They advocated for people being able to decide for themselves how they wanted to be governed. At that point, the church was the governing body, and there's even earlier encyclicals by earlier popes where it states very clearly that it's a heresy not to believe in the authority of the Pope. So those are the kind of things that you would think would be outdated, but the church has not rescinded them. The church still outlaws Freemasonry. Oh, by the way, before I became a Freemason, my sponsor, was a guy I met in the Pentagon, was a Catholic. I didn't know that at the time, but when I indicated I saw something on his wall and talked to him about it, was Masonry images. And he said, I was interested. And he said, before you do anything, you need to call the diocese and ask them what they think about you becoming a Mason. I said, why? He said, because there's some conflict between the church. And so I called the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia, called them and got online, asked for a priest, got a priest. I said, Father, listen, I'm a practicing Catholic. I just want to know, but it's okay for me to become a Freemason. I figured they're trying to take over the world. You know, I want to know how they're going to do it. He said, hang on a second. And he went away for about 20 minutes. And he comes back and he said, hey, as long as they don't ask you to do anything contrary to your faith, there's no problem. And so, boom, you know, I became a Freemason. Now I understand that maybe another priest would have given me a different answer, but I did check before I became a Mason.
Get it in writing.
Before I read that book.
So I just have one question. This is off topic, but what was it like being in the Pentagon on 9/11?
I was angry, I guess, is the main thing I felt. You know, we were like everybody else. We had seen the first tower hit. We were watching it when the second. I was in an operations center where there was all these televisions, right? And saw the second one hit. And then we had a meeting, and we were having a meeting because we were trying to decide how our security posture was going to change based upon what appeared to be an obvious terrorist attack. At that time, you could walk up to the Pentagon window and knock on the window if you wanted to. Just walk across the grass from Washington Boulevard. There was no wall. There was no fence. The helicopter pad was right there next to the side door. You can go in. And as we were in that meeting, we felt this bang and noise. And we were joking that the air conditioning system had kicked in because we were in the basement and there was an antiquated air conditioning system. Anyway, shortly after that, some people came in screaming to get out that a plane had hit the center courtyard, which it had not. The Pentagon has a 5-acre center courtyard. Hit the outside wall. But anyway, that started the whole evacuation process, and everybody was in the hallways trying to get up the stairs. I was not in the area that was hit. I was underground and on the other side of the building. So I was, even there, we felt it and heard it.
Wow.
But we didn't know what it was at that point. Trying to get out, though, they kept telling us to go back in because this other plane was supposedly inbound. We finally got out, and you train all the time to go to a specific assembly area in case of a fire. That all went to hell. They pushed us down by the river and told us to lay down because this other plane was coming in. But anyway, it was I was mainly angry. I could see all the smoke and the flame, and I went back in that same day. I was part of a team, about 15 people that went back in to reestablish communications. I worked at the time for Lockheed Martin, and we ran the operations center for the government. And we had it back up that night. And there were some amazing things done over the next week or so. There were very few people in the building. The Army Operations Center was there. They ran the building. The FBI was there. When we went back in that afternoon, about 6 o'clock, we walked through the center courtyard to get down to where we worked. None of us had any kind of equipment. We had our shirts across our face because there was smoke, but it was a triage area, and there were a lot of bodies that were laid out in the center courtyard. There was another triage area I later found out outside. But I stayed there for 2 days, and then went home, and then went back and forth every day. But we never left, except for the hour or two that we had to get out and account for our people and then go back in.
That's wild.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, there was, I was not, didn't do anything heroic that day, but there were a lot of people that did, especially over near the impact area. And but a lot of people did some really amazing things afterwards, rebuilding that place and bringing everything back online within hours. That plane hit. If you were to pick a spot, and I hate to say this because there were so many lives lost, but if you were to look at the Pentagon, it was under construction for different reasons. They were renovating it, and I was really familiar with that program because I worked on it. The night before, I had a group of students. I used to teach at Strayer University, and as part of the graduation part, I would bring them in and show them the operations center. You could do that then. I was walking out and I was showing them where all these offices had been vacated because they were renovating. The plane hit that exact spot, and I knew that there weren't thousands of people killed, but had it hit any place else, it would have killed probably, there's 30,000 people there in any one day. It hit a place that had been evacuated for the construction, and only some people had moved back in. So, 70 some
Amazing.
people on the plane, another 40 or 50 on the ground, instead of thousands.
That is a situation where you think about the, interaction with God or, whoever, just having the plane hit in that area. What are the odds?
Yeah, even how it happened is pretty intense. The plane flew over the Pentagon, headed into DC, and apparently they saw the Pentagon. It's hard to see, I think, at that height, at that speed, anything, but the Pentagon was obvious. And they did one complete circle back to the west, and they came in from the west again, west to east, and hit the west side of the building. But it was the one spot where if you were to say, hey, let's blow this part up, it would do the least amount of damage to life and also to the communication systems. It was not terrible.
That's wild.
Anyway, I know I've talked way too long. I don't know how long you want to make this, but
Well, yeah, this is all very fascinating to me.
you have to listen to your podcast because the questions you're having are, I think, are a lot of the same things.
Well, and so we were talking last week, and this is episode 51, but my family experienced some odd things in this one house where my son, when we pray at night, he would pray for the people around us. And we just kind of ignored it. And he was like 2 years old, could barely talk. And we just kept ignoring it. But then eventually we asked him, what people are you talking about? This is after like probably weeks of him doing it every night. And he would start pointing around the room at different people around us.
Really?
And none of our other kids behaved like that. Even in that house, there was one time maybe where our second child did something, but just the one child could see that. And he would even tell my wife when they were driving in the car away from our house, he would be like, drive faster, they're catching up. I don't know, it kind of freaked her out, but it's just odd stuff like that just makes you wonder what's really going on all around us that we just can't see. What's on the other side of the veil, or is the veil just so thin that you can kind of see?
I think there are people that, especially children, that appear to have those kind of experiences. Chloe, who's in that interview that you listened to today, Craig, when she was a little girl, she was seeing people, specifically a man that she described that Kelly Jo's mother later saw. So I believe it's possible that children, for some reason, are able to see things we can't.
One kind of philosophical, I don't know if it's a question or observation I have, but the one thing that I sometimes wrestle the most with faith and whatever, and is that what I have a hard time understanding is, if everything I believe is true, why does God sort of hide himself so much? Like, why are we just getting glimpses, it seems, of actual experience, as opposed to just you're raised, you're taught, you believe, maybe you get glimpses here and there of experience. Like I said, that experience in the chapel years ago has forever stuck with me. That, like, it was so tangible. Like, no matter everything else that comes, like, it was so real. But why is it so infrequent, or why is it? I don't know.
Have you ever thought about that type of experience before it happened? Had you read about people that smelled things, or
No, no.
one place where I think I probably do diverge quite a bit from my Catholic faith is my now belief in the concept of being able to manifest, or my thoughts become things. So I deliberately think about things. I think I mentioned to you before, every morning I say the same mantra when I wake up, that no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I'm going, my dominant intention today is to see what I want to see. And some unusual things have happened in the hospital where I said, today I need to see the doctor, or I want to meet this particular specialist, and they just show up. So I haven't been able to manifest winning a lottery ticket yet. But there are even people that address why that happens or why that doesn't happen. But the general focus of things, I believe that we create our own experience here in this life, and that we're not victims. Like I've been taught my whole Catholic life is, God is merciful, God is just, but God's going to send you to hell if you masturbate, or if you do any kind of sexual sin.
Are you sure you haven't been listening to our show?
I have not.
Okay, that's good.
But that's when I was raised, that was all really bad stuff, right? And I lived in fear of going to hell for the things I was thinking, or the girls I was thinking about. I'm way beyond that now, but
I don't believe that you haven't been listening to this show now, but no, I mean, that's one question I was actually going to ask you about is the sense that I've gotten from I haven't listened to all your episodes, but the sense that I've gotten from you is that whatever is after our life, you don't seem to see a lot of evidence of hell or punishment, flames, all that kind of stuff. Am I gathering that right?
that's accurate. I don't believe now that a loving God would condemn us to eternal fire for having failed in this one shot we have at life. And so I think we have multiple shots. I do believe there's a life review that happens afterwards, and the hell that we might experience, or the pain we experience, is of our own making as we go through that review. A lot of people have trouble with that concept because we think that surely somebody that does something wrong in this life, a murderer, a mass murderer, there must be some punishment for that person. But I don't think we understand. Well, I know we don't understand what happens beyond this life. And if I can just tell you a quick story, I know we're going crazy, but
You're fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
have you heard of the book Man's Search for Meaning?
I have not.
Viktor Frankl. Amazing little book. It was written by he was a World War II inmate in Auschwitz and other camps, and a psychiatrist, but he survived, and he writes a book that what he derived from that experience about man's search for meaning. But he mentions one story which relates to what you're talking about here. He was with a bunch of students after the war, and they were doing an experiment in Vienna, and he took them to see an ape. And they were doing polio experiments at that time, and they were sticking the ape with needles, both injecting and taking stuff out of him. But the ape was obviously suffering as he was going through this experiment. And so Frankl said to his students, the ape was obviously suffering. He said, do you think this ape understands the bigger purpose of his suffering? And of course, they all agreed, no, that there's no way that ape could be capable of comprehending the bigger purpose for why he's suffering. And Frankl said, what makes you think that the experience that we're in is the ultimate experience, that there isn't a reality beyond this, where the suffering we're going through makes sense to a larger God or a bigger perspective? And so really made me think that, I can't understand why my son died, but my wife lived. And I prayed for both of them. But I believe that there is a place where that is understood. And I believe in a loving God, and that there's no eternal hell for thinking about Kelly Joe, whatever.
Yeah.
Kelly
From
Joe,
a few years ago.
We knew what you meant. We knew what you meant.
You know what,
Joe,
I
I
kind
do
of-
well.
I kind of think that God doesn't reveal himself more like that, so he doesn't influence free will. Because if you do know too much, if you can truly see God, you have the chance to make a really stupid decision in that moment. And I don't know, that's just kind of the way that I think about it. But I also agree that God is merciful and even merciful to people that do terrible things sometimes. And hopefully that is, the reality.
I've heard free will explained in the sense that, you are here not by accident, right? Craig and Joni, you guys are here because your soul determined that this was the best place, and it's one of many times you've been here. But when you put this particular adventure together, you decide that you want to be here with this family, with this soul group, and you knew what the possibilities were, that you might well, for us living in the United States and having a good life, everything's great. But why would somebody decide to come to this world in Africa and live for 10 years and die in a horrible fight? Or why would somebody come and live in poverty? I believe that we make that decision to learn specific lessons, and we come here to learn those lessons, and we understand the probability. We have the free will when we get here, but we understand the high probability that we may die at age 10, or we may die. Anyway, I don't think anything is random. It's all planned out.
Just a big video game. I don't know. It's just like
There's another. Have you heard the concept of of where there's multiple lives that are going on?
Yeah, like a multiverse or the AI, like computer simulation, basically, that your whole life is
Yeah,
a
like
computer
every
simulation.
decision you make, there's another thing going on. So if you decide today, that you're going to take a right turn instead of a left turn as you're going home, there is a universe that happens or continues where you did take the left turn and other things happen. You're experiencing the one that you did the right turn. There's a term for it.
I think a multiverse, maybe
Multiverse or stacking or whatever, but everything, and this is what blows my mind, everything, I've come to believe that we are in a simulation. We are in a time and space simulation where none of this is real. That time is a fiction for us while we're here going through this experience. And outside of this, eternity, everything that can possibly happen has already happened. And when I start thinking about that, I go off in all kinds of rabbit holes. But so I think there's no coincidences.
I do tend to agree with you, and Craig and I argue about that.
yeah.
It leads to all kinds of,
Yeah.
it leads to 10, 15 hour discussions, not 1 hour or 2 hours.
Well, I think I got to have you back on, but I got to process some of this stuff, Mike.
I'm gonna find, what's your podcast called again?
Uncharted Catholic Man. I'll send you I'll throw it on YouTube. I'll send you the audio and video.
Okay.
And I'll put on YouTube. I'll send you a link. But I'd love to have you back on. But you should look at some of our episodes. I think you'd find it.
I will do that. This is really interesting. It's just funny how we're kind of on the same journey.
Yeah, I very much of the mind that there aren't coincidences. Now, why that is, I'm not sure I understand why, but I'm very much a believer in that. So,
And so, like, I don't want to get talking too much more, but Padre Pio, along those lines, when people would ask him things, he would either say, like, sometimes he would say, it hasn't been written yet. So he couldn't quite discern what might happen. But sometimes people would ask him about certain situations and he would say, it's been written. So it's going to be whatever way. And I'm not sure what that really means as far as like how certain things in life are kind of meant to be, where like, so if you look at 9/11 per se, have you heard of the something about universal consciousness, like where they were flipping coins continually in this computer simulation, but during the moment of 9/11, the amount of heads and tails got skewed to where it was only one of those for like repeatedly, like tails, like thousands of times. And so you think about just are there certain events, perhaps like 9/11, if you read more about that, there's a lot of articles about it online. But that maybe they are supposed to happen and the rest of it is up to free, more our deciding. I don't know.
I've heard that actually expressed that way, that there are certain things in your life that, it's a group consciousness thing. You can't change it. You can change what you're going to have for dinner today, but you're not going to change 9/11, or you're not going to change. We all work together to create what reality is. I'm a big fan of Padre Pio, by the way.
Huh.
I prayed to him a lot when our son was, and for other things earlier in my life. So
Yeah. Fascinating.
This has been great. It's interesting. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it too, and I would love to talk to you again. I'm going to listen to your podcast, guys, and see. Have you interviewed like any like people that are not Catholic, like that are out there, like astrologists or Wiccans or those kind of
No, you're kind of our first step outside. Well,
Our first step into the paranormal.
yeah, we've
Okay.
had plenty of non-Catholics on non-Catholic stuff, but this is our first.
We would really like to interview an exorcist,
Yeah,
though,
we're
if
trying to
you
hunt down an
would
exorcist.
know any.
I just was. There are some guys that are alive that are really well-known exorcists. It's probably hard to get them on your podcast.
I have reached out. They are tough to get a hold of. They're very busy guys. Like there's some that just do it though, kind of not in secret, but they're more personal about it. Like they're they keep it to themselves.
That's a huge question mark for me about the role of good and evil,
Mhm.
and what, is there a Satan? Is there evil? How does that? Not that anybody knows for sure, but there are different perspectives out there. I'm not.
It'd be
I'm
nice to know. It would be nice to know that for sure.
not- I keep
But-
thinking my son knows. Is there some way he could tell me?
Yeah, right.
And my loved relatives that have all passed. That's why I do meditate and try to at least hear from them. But I don't know the answer to that question.
Well,
You get to where you start want to interview people that are out there, way out there. Let me know, because I know a lot of them now.
Well,
not way out there, but
Yeah, no,
astrology and
outside our normal
outside
circles.
progression. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Well, we've sort of established this standard for us, which is a very low standard in terms of we'll talk just about anything to anyone as long as people are respectful. So
Good.
So, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to wrap up the recording, and then if you got just a minute afterwards, we'll chat, and then I'll let you
Sure.
go. So, well, thank you so much, Mike. I guess one question, and I'll put a link below, but what's the name of your podcast?
It's called The Soul Unleashed.
Okay.
And Mike Nicholas, and my website is mikenicholas.com. Pretty simple.
Okay. Are you a social media guy, or are you pretty much the podcast on the website, or?
Right now, just the podcast and the website. Someday I want to grow up and be like you, but
All
right now I'm not.
right. Well, I'll post to that below. I'm really excited to see what our audience's reaction is to this. So anyway, well, thank you, Mike. Until next time, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.